to check my steering shaft. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, it's not broken, it's not cracked. There's no illegal welds on it. Alright? From there, then we'll come down here. I'm going to check my U-joint. Make sure they're properly mounted and secured. They're not loose, they're not broken. And it's got the proper amount of grease in it. Alright? From there, I'm going to go ahead and check my frame. Check my frame, make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, it's not broken, it's not cracked. There's no illegal welds on it. I'm going to check the bolts on it. Make sure they're properly mounted and secured. None of the bolts are loose. None of them missing. Make sure there's no sign of looseness on the bolts. Looseness would be shiny threads, rust trail. Okay? From there, now I'm going to come over here. Oops, sorry. And check. I'm going to check my power steering cap. Alright, check my power steering cap. I'm going to check my seal. Make sure my seal's in there. It's properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, frayed, or broken. It's not missing. And it's not showing any kind of leaking signs. Then I'm going to check my threads. Make sure they're not cross-threaded. If it's cross-threaded, that means it's not sealing, so it's going to leak. Alright, now I'm going to turn the cap over. I'm going to check the condition of the cap on the top and the side. Make sure it's not cracked or broken. If it's cracked or broken, it's going to be an indication that the cap is either cracked or it's broken and it's not sealing right. And it's causing it to leak. Okay? Okay, now, alright, this is your dipstick for the power steering fluid. You would pull it out the same way that you would check the oil stick. You would pull this one out the same way to check it. You would look at it, make sure it's not milky looking, it's got no trash, debris, and it's got no metal shavings in it. Then you would wipe it off, put it back in, pull it back out, and make sure it's at the proper operating range. Okay? Then I'm going to go ahead and check my power steering hoses. Make sure they're properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, frayed, or broken, and they're not leaking. All right. Then I'm going to come over here and check all my clamps. Make sure all my clamps are good. None of them broken, none of them's loose. They're all tight, and they're not leaking. There's no shiny threads or a rust trail on them. Okay. I'm going to check my fitting for my power steering line. Make sure my fitting's properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, it's not broken, and it's not leaking. Alright? And it is tight and not loose. Loose will be a shiny threads or a rust trail on it. Okay? Alright, now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to check I want to check my power steering reservoir. Make sure my power steering reservoir is properly mounted and secured. It's not loose, it's not broken, it's not cracked, and it's not leaking. And I also want to check my clamp for my power steering pump. Make sure it's not loose, it's not cracked, it's not broken. Alright, and it is tight. Alright, now I'm going to come down here. I'm going to check my gearbox. Check my gearbox, make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not loose, it's not bent, it's not broken, no illegal welds on it. I'm going to check all my bolts on it. Make sure none of my bolts are loose. Make sure they're all intact, none of them missing. There's no sign of looseness on them. The sign of looseness would be shiny threads or a rust trail. And make sure they're all tight. Okay? Then I also want to make sure that all my seals are not leaking around my bolts. Okay? Alright. Now I'm going to go down here to the upper pitman arm. And check my upper pitman arm. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, it's not broken, and there's no illegal welds on it, and it's not cracked. Alright, from there I'm going to go down here to my castle nut. Check my castle nut, make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, it's not broken, and there's no illegal welds on it. Then I want to also check to make sure that it's tight. Alright? And then I also want to check my Carter key. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. Make sure the Carter key's intact. It's not broken. It's not missing. Okay? Then I'm going to come over here to my drag link. Check my drag link. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, broken. It's not cracked. There's no illegal welds on it. Alright, then I'm going to check my clamp for my drag link, where it hooks into the steering arm. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not broken. It's not loose. and it's not missing, and it is tight. All right, from there, I'm gonna come back to my spring mount. Check my spring mount, make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, it's not broken, it's not cracked, there's no illegal welds on it. And it's properly mounted and secured. Okay? And from there, I'm gonna go to my leaf springs. This is my leaf spring right here. Okay? Properly mounted and secured, not bent, not broken, not cracked, no illegal welds. None of it's missing. Can't have no more than a 1/4 inch missing. It cannot be shifted more than a 1/4 inch. Okay? Now, I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna check my U-bolts. Alright? Check my U-bolts. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. Not bent, not broken. It's not missing. There's no sign of looseness. Make sure it's tight. Okay? Sign of looseness would be shiny threads, rust trail. You would see shiny metal down there if it is loose. You would also see if there's dirt all around the bolt. You would be able to tell there would be a gap between the bolt and the dirt. Alright, now I'm going to come over here and go ahead and check my shock absorber. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, not broken, not leaking. And it is intact and there's no illegal welds on it. Okay? Then I would check my bolts for my shock absorber. Make sure my bolts are properly mounted and secured. They're not loose, they're not broken, they're not bent, no illegal welds. Make sure it is intact. And it's not loose. Light sign of looseness would be shiny threads or a rust trail. Okay? Alright, from there, I'm going to come up here and check my air brake line. Check my line to make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, it's not broken, it's not cracked, frayed, or broken, or leaking. Okay? Then I'm going to check my fitting for my air line. Checking my fitting to make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, it's not cracked, it's not broken, and it's not leaking. Then I'm going to come over here to my air brake chamber. I'm going to check my air brake chamber, make sure it's properly mounted and secured. Not bent, broken, and it's not cracked. And there's no illegal welds, and it's not leaking. I'm going to also check to make sure that clamp going around that air brake chamber right there is not loose, it's not broken, and it's not leaking. And there's no illegal welds on it. Then I'm going to come over here and check to make sure my bolt is properly mounted and secured. It's not loose, it's intact, it's not missing, and it's tight. And make sure it's not got no shiny threads or rust trail indicating that it might be loose. Okay? Then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to check my push rod. This is my push rod right here. I want to make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, broken, it's not cracked. There's no illegal welds on it. I also want to check that my push rod and my slack adjuster, my pins in there, connecting them two together. Alright, now I'm going to check my slack adjuster. Proper way to check the slack adjuster is with the wheels chocked, with both of your brakes released. You would come out here and make sure it does not move more than 1 inch. Shouldn't have no more than 1 inch of play in the slack adjuster. Okay? Check my slack adjuster, make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, it's not broken, it's not leaking. And there's no illegal welds on it. Alright, I'm going to check my pin. Make sure my pin's intact. It's not loose, it's not broken, and it's not missing. And make sure my Carter key is intact. And it's not missing, it's not broken, it is there. I'm going to check my other pin. Make sure it's intact. Make sure it's there, it's not missing. It's not bent or broken. And then I'm going to check my Carter key for it. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. And make sure that Carter key is not missing or broke. And then I'm going to check my steering arm. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. Not bent, not broken, no illegal welds. Oh, man. And it is intact, and there's no damage to it. I check my castle nut for it. Make sure the castle nut's intact, not missing, not broken, not loose. Sign of looseness would be shiny threads, rust trail. I'd also check to make sure my Carter key's in place. Make sure it's there. Make sure it's not bent or broke. All right. Now from there, I'm going to come down here and check my drum lining, my brake shoes and my drums. I'm going to check to make sure, first of all, to make sure there ain't no oil or grease in between them. If it had oil or grease in between them, then you might see it probably catch on fire going down the road if they get too hot. All right. Also, you want to make sure your brakes, your lining, your shoe lining, is no less than 1/4 of an inch. All right. Then I'd also check my drum. Make sure my drum was properly mounted and secured. They wasn't bent, broken, cracked. No sign of looseness. No illegal welds. Then I'm gonna come and check the inside part of my tire. Properly mounted and secured. There's no bumps, abrasions, no cuts, not dry rotted, and it is mounted properly. Then I'm gonna come out here to my tire tread. I want to make sure that it's evenly worn. On a steer tire, can't be no less than 4/32, and they need to be wearing evenly. Make sure there's no cuts. Make sure there's nothing in the tire. All right, and make sure there's no chunks missing. All right, from there, I'm gonna come over here and check the outside part of my tire. Properly mounted and secured around the rim. All right, no bumps, no abrasions, not dry rotted, no cuts, no gashes in it. Properly mounted and secured. Then I'm gonna check my rim. Properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, broken, and no cracks in it, no illegal welds. Then I'm also gonna check to make sure my valve stem's there. That it has a cap on it. It's not bent, broken. It's not touching the rim. The nut that's in the back is intact. It's tight. It's not loose, and it's not leaking. And if I had an air pressure gauge, I would make sure it's at the proper operating range. Alright, now I'm going to check the lug nuts. Make sure all the lug nuts are intact. Make sure none of them's loose. They're properly mounted and secured. Sign of looseness would be shiny threads or rust trails. Alright, now I'm going to check the hub, the steering hub. Properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, not broken. And it is tight. It is tight. There's no sign of leaking anywhere. The seal's good. And it had a sight glass. I would look at the sight glass and make sure it had the proper amount of oil in it. If I couldn't see the oil, then I would take the rubber off of it and stick my finger in there and make sure it touched my finger. Okay. All right. Now from there, I'm going to go to the side of the truck. First thing I'm going to check is my mirror. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not bent, not broken, and there's no sign of looseness. All the bolts are intact. None of the bolts are missing. No sign of looseness on the bolts. None of them missing. All right. Then I'm going to come around here. I'm going to check my mirrors. Make sure my mirrors are intact, properly mounted and secured. They're not missing. They're clean, and no illegal stickers. All right. Then I check the condition of my door while I'm out here. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. There's no damage to the door. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and check my door seal. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, frayed, or broken, and there's none of it missing anywhere. And then I would check to make sure it's not leaking as I'm going down the road when I'm inside. Check my handle, my grab handles. Make sure they're properly mounted and secured. They're not loose, they're not broken, and none of the bolts are missing. No sign of looseness. Shiny threads or rust trails would indicate that it'd be loose. All right, then I check my door hinges. Door hinges, make sure they're properly mounted and secured. They're not missing. They're not loose. No illegal welds. All the bolts are intact. Okay. All right. From there, I'm going to check the condition of my door on the inside. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not loose. It's not broken. All the bolts are intact. All right. Next thing I'm going to check is my door latch. Make sure it's properly mounted and secure, and it is working properly. Y'all see that? Okay, you do have to check that. Okay, from there, I would check my door handle. Make sure my door handle is properly mounted and secure, and it is working properly. Okay, from there, I'm going to check my steps. Make sure they're properly mounted and secure. They're not bent, they're not broken, they're not missing. All the bolts are intact, none of them are loose. Alright? And make sure there's no sign of looseness on the bolts. Shiny threads or rust trails. I check this step the same way I check that step. Okay? I would check my battery and my air tanks. They're behind this vent.